Hey, what is going on, people? This is Hellbent, and at the end of part 2 of the PixelSearch tutorial, I had mentioned that I'll check back in a week or two, and if there was enough, if the rating was high enough, I would make a third part to it. So I checked, and the rating is unfortunately high enough for me to do a third part. I was hoping that you guys would let me down and not rate the video, but a bunch of you did, and it fell above what my expectation is as a percentage of the views. So that said, at the end of this one, there's probably going to be a fourth part, but if you don't want a fourth part, just don't bother rating the video. And when I check back in a week or two, um, depending on if the rating meets my threshold, I will either not create a new tutorial on this subject, or I will create a new tutorial on this subject. Okay, so what I have on the screen right now is exactly, I assume is exactly where I left off at the end of the last part, where we had just set it so that way we could use hotkeys to start a pixel search with a click function in it, and also be able to use a hotkey to set the color. One thing I didn't do though is, let me get my helper. I forgot to get my helper. So in the description I will leave a link to this script right here, which is, I think I can just get rid of that. I was playing around with another new script and I added it into it. This still should work just fine, but actually let me take a second. I'll take a second and I'll get that out of here. Check it. Because that's just gonna confuse things. I think that should do it. Hopefully I didn't do any mistakes. Alright, let's see. Okay, so there's going to be a link in the description to this little tool, and this will help you with making sure that your script is working properly, because it's a quickly accessible environment that you can change the size and the position of these different elements to make sure that everything is working properly. So like I said, there'll be a paste bin link to this script in the description. You can just paste it into a new script, and then as you're doing a test with through this tutorial, you'll be able to use that as your test environment. Okay, so what we're going to do in this one is, just like in the last one, we had made it so that way we could update the color that we're going to be looking for by using a hotkey. We're going to do the same this time, except what we're going to do is we're going to use hotkeys to specify what portion of the screen we're going to be doing our search in. So let's just create a couple of new hotkeys. When I come back to probably not the next part, but if I end up doing a part after that, what I'll actually do is if anyone's interested, we can make a project of actually incorporating this kind of script into its own GUI, or graphical user interface, so that way you can just press a bunch of buttons and type in some things and whatever, and you can basically an auto clicker for pixel search. Okay, so let's create a couple of new hotkeys. I don't know how many I'm going to need. I think I can do it with probably just one. So I'm going to make it number pad 4. And I haven't planned out exactly what I'm going to do step by step, because I'm pretty sure I can just wing this. So we're going to press number pad 4, and what we're going to do with number pad 4 is we're going to get it to update some variables. So what we're going to do is, up here we have it right here, we have it hard coded where our search position is. Instead of us hard coding it, what we're going to do now is we're going to put some variables in here. So let me make sure that I don't have these variables used over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called startx SX, good enough for me. SX for start X. And we're going to set its value to, by default, we're going to set it to 0. Then we're going to do SY, or the starting Y position, and we're going to set its starting value to 0. Next, we're going to create a variable for our end positions, and we're going to use our screen width and our screen height as the beginning values. So that'll be end x or ex equals a screen height no, that's y. My bad. That's end y. The end x is the screen width. Okay, so we have our beginning positions and our end positions. Now we just need to change our stuff in here. I'm not sure if I can just plug in variables right in here, or if I need to put them as an express. Oh, you know what? Since I can see that I'm using a variable here, I can already tell that I don't need to wrap these in percent marks. So it's just sx and sy. This is one of the things that takes a little while to get used to AutoHotkey. You're probably already familiar with this, is when to you can use expressions and when you can't use them. It flips around from case to case, so you always have to anticipate that you might need to switch between one or another. Okay, so there we go. We've incorporated it now so that way it'll run with variables. Now let's do a quick test. Let's do a quick test because I haven't ran this in a while. So I'll run the helper and I'll run this, and if I pull up the helper, I'll take it and I will change the color of the target to, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, some random color. So it's this bluish, really dark blue, grayish color. If I look at the script, I can see that if I press number pad 3, it'll lock that color into our script. So I'll select that and press number pad 3. And now, if I press number pad 1, it should start clicking it. Oh, it was still selected on that. So let me deselect that. Okay, number pad 1. I suppose I should have. Let me try updating that again. I'll press number pad 2 to make sure the script is stopped. That probably was the reason. It was probably because I pressed 1. And let me lock this color again. Number pad 3, number pad 1. Okay, there we go. So our script is working. So I'll press number pad 2 to stop it. So it's chasing it around and clicking on it. Now what we're going to do is, now that we have those two variables here, what we can do is actually use a similar thing to what we did up here and update the values of those. So what we'll do is we'll create another variable and we'll call this switch. We'll call it switch. And we'll set its value to we'll set its value to 1 because we're going to do a toggle. Actually, you know what? I don't even need this. But I'm going to leave it in here anyways, because sometimes I like to actually set a hard-coded value for things that I'm going to be toggling on and off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this here to 1, and as soon as I press it, it's actually going to reset the value to 0. So I'll leave that there. So I'm going to type in here switch equals not switch. So to begin with, as soon as I press this, switch equals 1, but as soon as it encounters this, it's going to switch it back to 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's put up a condition. So I'm going to say if switch, which is basically if switch equals 1 in our case. And I don't need these because it's only going to be one line. So I'm going to get our mouse get position. So I'm going to, if the switch equals 1, And you know what, I'll just type it out. I usually like to just, I know I don't need to, but I like to actually read my code like this. So I don't care what other people do. I don't care what other people's opinion on it are. I code for me, so this is how I like to do it, so this is how I do it. Okay, so if switch equals 1, we're going to update the value of our starting position. No. No, if switch equals 0. If switch equals 0, because it starts at 1, as soon as we press this the first time, it's going to set it to 0. So if switch equals 0, we're going to be looking for our starting X position and our starting Y position. We can say else, or the way I usually prefer to do it is just to be clear and just say else if, because sometimes I'll have other conditions that I want to test that I might add later on, and if I just have an else, then I have to go back through my code and edit it and everything like that. So what I do usually is, as I'm building up the project, I'll start it with this kind of format, and then when I'm done, when I'm completely done and I want to clean up my code a little bit, then I can get rid of the else if and etc., etc. But to make it easier for myself, in fact, usually what I'll do is, even though I know I don't need it, I'll actually usually put the braces in, because if I want to do like add a message box in here or whatever, because I have the braces, I don't have to do any editing to the code. But if I only had the one line without the braces, then if I want to add in the message box or a tooltip or something like that, I have to go through my code and edit in these braces again. So I'll just add that in. So like I said, if switch equals 0, we'll get the starting position. If switch equals 1, we'll get our ending position. And I'll just copy this, put it in here, and this is going to be our end X and our end Y. Okay, now a bunch of the things I'm going to be doing through this, I'm going to assume that you know what you're doing when you do it. So I'm not going to put a lot of robust things in that would say, well, you know, if I reverse the values, etc., etc., then might not work for what we're going to be doing in a second. I'm just going to assume that you know that that's how it's set up to be. You'll understand in a minute. Okay, so now we have the ability that we can create a starting position for our search and an ending position for our search, because right now it's set to search the whole screen. But when we run it the next time, we're going to be able to pick a portion of the screen to do our search on. So I'll run this. Make sure it's running. Alright, and I'm going to set this as the color by hovering over it and pressing number pad 3. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a search area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that way we're only searching up till that last digit there. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to press number pad 4. And then I'm going to come over here and down to here and press number pad 4 again. So the first time it should have locked our first position, and then the second time we did it, it should have locked our second position. And once again, we could have used two different hotkeys, one to do the start position, one to do the end position, but here we just toggled between the two different states or two different values, and depending on what that value is, we'll end up with different variable values. Okay, so I think that everything should be okay. So if I hit number pad 1, it should hopefully chase this around as long as it falls within this area. If not, I'll have to look to see where my error is. Okay, there we go. So it's fallen out. It's now outside of the area, so it stopped clicking it. Next thing I'm going to do is to have this a little bit more robust test of it. I'm going to increase the speed of this, and I'm going to set it to move mode. And now if I press number pad 1, or if it's actually still going, it should just keep chasing it as long as it falls within that area that we had it searching. As soon as it moves out, it stops. So we can see that it's working. Let's do one more quick test. We'll set it so that way if it falls between number pad 4 and number pad 4, if it falls in between this portion of the screen, it'll do that. And hopefully it'll leave that other area soon. Come on, go past the starting position. Let me Let me switch this to click mode and see if we can get it to, okay, there, it should be outside. If I hit number pad 1 again and then go to move mode, now we should see it move into our starting position. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, we now have the ability to actually select what part of the screen that we want. So I'll hit number pad 2 and I'll set this back to click mode and minimize. The last thing that we're going to do is as soon as we set our positions, what we're going to do is we're going to create a little interface or a little window that actually displays where our search is, so that way we can actually get a visualization of where our search is going to be happening. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a GUI window, and we're going to call it number 1. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that if it existed before, we're going to get rid of that previous one. So we're just going to destroy that window. So the first time we run it, it doesn't exist, no problem, so we can just destroy it. Destroying something that doesn't exist doesn't hurt. So next what we'll do is we'll set it so that way it stays on top of our screen, so that way if we accidentally click on the other window or whatever, it should still stay on top of that. So we'll put in here always on top. And a couple other options that we'll put in here is we will get rid of the caption because we don't need the normal border and everything. We just need a little window that has a color on it perhaps. So we'll get rid of the caption. And what else do we want? Maybe we'll put a border around it. And we'll make this the last found window, because what we're going to do in a second is we're going to make this semi-transparent, so that way we can actually see what's behind it as well. No, last found. So we'll make this last found, and then right after that what we'll do is we'll say when set, and then we'll say transparent, and we will set it to about 100. So 0 is completely invisible, 255 is completely opaque. We'll set it somewhere closer to invisible, so we'll barely be able to see it. Next thing we'll do is we'll give it a color. So we'll say GUI color. And we'll set the color to, let's go with green. Actually, green is a dark green, so what we'll do instead is we'll make it a bright green by setting it to 0 for the red, max for the green, and 0 for the blue. So this gives us a nice bright green color. And the last thing we'll do is we will show yeah, we'll show our GUI. The position that it's going to start is going to be our starting X. Now, there's a couple of ways I can do this. One way is I can create 2 new variables up here that do the calculation between the starting position and the end position to get my width. Another way I can do that is I can write it in here as an expression. So that's what I'll do, is I'll just put that, and then X equals SX quote space Y quote SY quote space W quote space this is going to be this is going to be our end position subtract our beginning position, so it's going to be end Y minus our start our end X minus our start X, which gives us our width. And then last quote space height quote and space, and it's going to be our end Y minus our starting Y. Okay, so this gives us our window to actually visualize it, but we don't want to keep it there because we're not going to actually be able to interact with the things that are going on behind it. So instead what we'll do is we'll just say sleep for 2 seconds. 2 seconds is good enough to get to see that. And then we'll say GUI 1 destroy. So if everything works properly, what we should do is as soon as we set our top and bottom position, it should pop up this window that is semi-transparent that we can see the actual dimensions that we're going to be clicking in or doing our search in. So let's go ahead and run this. And what we'll do is, once again, we got it because our color isn't the same as this, we'll set that color by hitting number pad 3. And then we'll set our top position. I'll set it so that way it's a little box with a little bit of edge around it. So I'll say number pad 4. Oh. Okay. That what just happened makes complete sense. I just now got to think about, okay, how am I going to get this to display when I actually want it to display? And I think what I'll do is I'll take this code here and I'll erase it from there and I'll put it in here. So that way when we set our second position, it's actually that's when it's gonna display. Okay, so let's try that again. I'll set this as the color by hitting number pad 3, and then I'll set the starting position right about there and the end position right about there. And there we go. We can now see where we have it set to do our target find or our pixel search. I'll start this and press number pad 1, and if it moves inside that area, it'll do that. Okay, so that's that. Now we've seen it when we create that box. What if we want to actually be able to see it later on? Like, what if later on we forget where we set it? So what we'll do is we'll create another hotkey. We'll set it to number pad 5, and we'll just duplicate. We'll just take this here and put it in here. Okay, so if I start the script, if I press number pad 5, because these default values are already set up here, we should get a green box that covers our entire screen. And there we have it. Alright, now, oh, I didn't mean to actually close this. Oh well. Now what we'll do is we'll set this as our color, number pad 3. We will set our box size of, let's go with from here down to here. We will, one last thing we'll do here, because if we run that, if we run this while the other part of the script is working, it's going to stop it anyways. Like, it's not going to be able to click on through it. Actually, you know what? That probably isn't going to make a difference. But what we could do in here is we could take that stop variable and we can switch it to a value of 1 as soon as we press this. But it's not going to make any difference in our case. But perhaps in your case, stopping the search does make sense. So let's go ahead and we'll set this again, and I'll set the box to be about there. I'll turn this to move mode, I'll speed it up, and I'll press number pad 1, and as long as it falls inside of our box, okay, perhaps I've forgotten what my box looks like, so I'll hit number pad 5, and there it is. Okay, that should cover this tutorial. On the next one, what we're going to look at is search patterns. So that way, how this works right now, if I had multiple of these squares moving around, it's going to always go after the one that's at the top left corner, depending on how I put in the dimensions. Like if I started with down here and then moved up to here, it would do the reverse. Now that's what I was talking about before. I had mentioned that I'm going to assume that you know how this is supposed to work, because what we would actually have to do is, let's see what happens if I change this. If I change it to where I start down here to set my starting position. So I'm going to press number pad 4 here, and then I'm going to hit number pad 4 again up here. See, what happens is that that window doesn't exist anymore, right? So if I wanted it so that way I could reverse between starting at the top left and moving to the bottom right, if I wanted to make it to be able to start at the bottom right and move to the top left, all I would have to do is, before I actually do the show, I would have to test to see if the starting X and starting Y is a less value or a greater value than the end X and end Y. And depending on which one of those is greater, I would switch out these. So I might start with this would be the end Y, end X, and the end Y, and the width would be the start X minus the end X. Yeah. All right. But like I said, this is assuming that you're always going to be working from the setting your box, your search pattern from the top left down to the bottom right. Alright, like I said, if you want to do it so that way you can reverse that, in order for the GUI to actually show up, you have to do a little bit of math to calculate which one is actually greater or less than. Alright, that's it for this one. On the next one, like I said, I'm going to cover creating a search pattern, so that way if I have multiple targets that are the same color, I might not necessarily want to always target the same one that's up here. Perhaps I want it to switch around to other ones that are somewhere else, and we'll cover that in the next tutorial. But that depends on you and the rating of this video when I come back around. Have a good day, and I'll see you guys on the next one.